Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Coyotes, which the Sharks won 3-2 in overtime. And I feel bad for people who may have turned off this game after the first 30 or so minutes, because honestly it seemed as though both teams were still on vacation, still on their long all-star break, with just the amount of nothing that was going on really in the game. There was very little that was exciting. You could have definitely fallen asleep during those first 30 minutes, but it seemed as though that after that, once the Coyotes got that first goal from Connor Garland, the pace really started to pick up. It was starting to get somewhat exciting. The Sharks got a couple goals, Labanc and Pavelski's 28th, team leading 28th. Then coming to the third period, the Sharks were getting penalty after penalty getting called on them, but they were getting shorthanded chances when they were down. They even had 40 seconds of being down 5-3, and they managed to kill that off. And then Archibald for the Coyotes managed to tie the game. That made it 2-2, and after that, basically, there was just no more defense. It was looking like the Washington Sharks game that they played right before the All-Star break, just a run-and-gun type of style. It was going both ways. Kemper had to be very good for the Coyotes. Jones had to be very good for the Sharks at the end in those last 5 or so minutes of the third period, because definitely could have seen one of those teams scoring a goal to win it in regulation, but it did not end up happening. This game went to overtime, and in an overtime that you could certainly say was sloppy, I guess, to put it to say the least, because not really much was connecting. You could sort of blame it maybe on the ice. I know there was a San Jose Barracuda game earlier today in San Jose, so maybe the ice wasn't great, but bodies were flying everywhere. Pucks were not being passed in the correct position until Brent Burns manages to get one here in the corner or near the corner and cuts to the middle. Beautiful move by him, gets his 10th of the season, an overtime winner. And so now the Sharks 2 games in a row, 2 wins, 2 overtime wins, which I didn't think I'd be saying again this season after the way the Sharks had been performing in overtimes earlier on. But the first thing to talk about would be Martin Jones. He lets in only 2 goals in this game, which is a lot better than the 6 he has been letting in the past, I think it's 3 games now. The Capitals, the Panthers, and the Lightning. So it was a pretty solid game for him. A couple of very nice saves. Obviously, the one on Nick Cousins in the third period stands out as a big one, although Cousins' shot wasn't great. But he also made some other decent saves. He kept the Sharks alive, as I said, in those last 5 minutes, preventing the Coyotes from getting a goal to break the 2-2 tie. And so basically, he did his job in this game, which was to keep the Coyotes goals to a limit of just about 2. And so the Sharks gave him just enough goal support to get the extra point here, 3-2, and it's a key extra point because of the fact that the Flames lost to the Capitals yesterday, and the Golden Knights also lost today. Next is Brent Burns, who I said made a fantastic move in the overtime to get the goal. He was also having just in general a pretty solid game. He played almost 30 minutes tonight because Erik Karlsson did not play, so the predicted 2-week break that would give him enough rest to actually be able to return to the lineup didn't end up happening, even though he played in the All-Star game, which I get. Most players, or a lot of players, will actually sort of look for an injury to themselves to see if they can skip the All-Star game. I mean, Ovechkin basically just took the suspension and decided to not participate. We had Carey Price, who was injured and decided not to participate. We had a couple of other players. Sidney Crosby missed the skills competition with an illness. I know McKinnon didn't participate in either the skills or the game, although he did end up participating in the festivities, so he didn't get suspended. But Erik Karlsson, with the All-Star game in San Jose, even if he wasn't at 100%, which clearly he was not, decided to participate. He does not play tonight. Hopefully he'll be back for the road trip. I assume he'll play at some point during the road trip, but hopefully for the Sharks, since the first half of that road trip will be with games against the Jets and the Flames. Hopefully Erik Karlsson is back for the first one there, but it would be unfortunate if he was not. But Brent Burns did a very good job at carrying the load here. As I said, he played about 30 minutes. He got a goal in the overtime. He also got an assist on the Kevin Labanc goal. And so a solid game for him. He continues to put up the points, extending his team leading point lead to 57 with those. Next is Vlasic, who, unlike Karlsson did actually end up returning from his injury. Of course, his injury was sustained a lot earlier, which was about the start of January. So at the start of February, he makes his return, and he actually had a pretty solid game all around. He did still end up a -1, which has been an issue for Vlasic, but certainly not his fault. Just a horrific giveaway by Tim Heed behind the net to Connor Garland. Basically, that was the goal that broke the tie and really ignited this game off, as I said. But otherwise, Vlasic I thought was solid. Basically, Vlasic's best games and games that we were not getting enough of during the first half of the season are games where you cannot really point to anything where Vlasic did anything wrong. And, yes, you would like a more sort of two-way type of defenseman who gets into the offensive play, and Vlasic wasn't really that tonight. But still, it's still a good start to getting to his game back to where it needs to be, where you can look at a game and say, well, there wasn't really any glaring mistake. As I said, that wasn't something that you could say a lot about Vlasic earlier on during this season. Now, of course, one thing that he did participate in and did a great job in was the Sharks' penalty kill, which is the last thing to talk about. The penalty kill went 5 for 5. As I said, it included a 5-on-3 kill, and this penalty kill had been struggling recently. They said a stat on the broadcast that I think on the last 15 attempts, the Sharks gave up 7 power play goals, which is just barely better than 50%. And that's just an insanely low number. You need that to be a lot higher, and it was a lot higher for the Sharks. They came in tonight, though, 10th place in the league on the penalty kill. They once were 2nd place in the league for a good chunk of the season. And so with the arrival of Vlasic, and we'll see when Erik Karlsson comes back, the penalty kill looked a lot better. Yes, it was only the Coyotes. They're not necessarily the most skilled of teams, especially with all the injuries that they do have, but still a great sign, especially considering the 5-on-3. And if the Sharks' penalty kill can get back to their desired level, with the power play doing pretty well and the forward lines and the defense seemingly improving here in this game, the Sharks could really be at firing on all cylinders and be a huge contender for the rest of this regular season as well as into the playoffs. But the penalty kill is going to be a huge part, because once it comes to the playoffs, I have said that obviously penalties are called a lot less, but that just makes the penalties that are called so much more important. Than a lot of playoff games can come down to a special teams battle where both teams, let's say, get called for just 2 penalties each, and if one team gets a power play goal and the other team does not, it is a huge difference in very tight playoff games. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Tuesday. They will face off against the Winnipeg Jets, who are coming off of a massive win against the Anaheim Ducks, 9-3, a game they led 6-0 at the end of the first period. The Sharks have also lost to the Jets already this season, 5-3, so they're going to be looking for some revenge there. Martin Jones is going to have to be at his very best to hold off this offensively gifted Winnipeg Jets team, a team that's also first place in the Central Division, as the Sharks look to continue to try and catch up to the Calgary Flames, because if the Flames can lose again coming up here, I believe tomorrow they play, and then the Sharks can defeat the Flames when they also meet on Thursday of next week, the Sharks could be a threat for first place in the Pacific Division. Class dismissed.